Welcome to part 3 of my series on spending many months in meditation retreat. And this part I'm dedicating to talking some on the challenges. Now, first of all, there are some challenges that weren't there for me and other people who are doing this type of meditation practice. Mainly, and I know actually I'm responding to some of the comments I got on some previous videos. There seems to be a trope of, my knees would kill me, or, that would be, I wouldn't be able to last physically, or something like that. Now that area of challenge, non-existent for the type of meditation practice that I was doing. The type of practice, which I still do, by the way, and teach and all that sort of stuff. It's been 20 some years. It's completely effortless. And what I mean by effortless is not like fake effortless. No, there's no forcing of the mind. There's no attempt to forcibly still the mind. There's no attempt to try to remove other thoughts from the mind. That is not part of this practice. It's not the logic of how this practice gets one into samadhi at all. 2, physically, there's no particular posture that one has to take to do this. So, one can be in lotus or half lotus if one wants to be. You can be sitting up in a chair like I am right now, but you could also be in bed, or you could be on a chaise longue, or you could go straight into your formalized meditation practice from Shavasana. So posture is like in any given day, sometimes I would be in one posture for hours and hours and hours and hours, maybe from 9 a.m. until the 5 or 6 p.m. Dinner bell. Other times, do one posture for 3 hours and go over here and, do another couple hours and go over here and do this. And so, not a big deal at all. 2, this wasn't coinciding with fasting in any way. So, there's nothing like that. So it wasn't, we're not trying to be, in this practice, ascetics of the month. Okay, so that's out of the way. Now we'll get into some challenges, and those are going to have a lot of overlap with, I think, a lot of what I was talking about in part 2. So what would be the main challenge? I think I wrote some stuff down here. I have to say, honestly, my own particular version of this course, I don't think it was all that challenging, because I had already been doing this particular practice, the Ascension meditation. I'd already been doing this in this monastic setting, not in retreat mode, but in the monastic setting for 18 months beforehand. And before that, I was doing sort of more hardcore ascetical practices, for about a year, very consistently. And so in that 18 months, I think I had a lot of the kinks worked out, and a lot of the stuff that people get, really tripped up on if they, are only doing this practice for a number of months and then jump into a retreat and then jump into a long retreat. But still, some of them there, absolutely. So number 1, emotions. That is something, generally part of the healing process. That's where people get tripped up and face the most challenges, is the fact that, especially this type of meditation practice, is not one where you can easily go to sort of run away from anything. In fact, it's one that basically will force you into everything, and if you're doing it intensely like that, welcome to your shadow. Welcome to becoming reacquainted with all of those parts of personality, or with all those emotions that at some point in your life, because of parents or this, that, or the other thing, we deemed as unworthy. And so those are going to come up. And so, some people are surely more ready for that process than others. But challenging almost universally it is, and so that's number 1, is having everything kind of come up, and so natural, and also so integrated with the body. Like another thing people learn, in some ways I felt like I was being taught by the process of doing the meditation itself, that I was being taught how to surf with the waves of emotional and physical release. And sometimes there was no teasing apart physical, emotional, mental. They're all kind of a similar unit, just different parts of the same thing. So frequently. And God, like what was, at that point, I think I still hated embarrassment at that point. And so, of course, it's interesting that there is a very common phenomena where if you really, really dislike something, you're going to have it brought into your little world in often comical ways. And so there it is. On the more purely physical end, I remember having a headache for 10 days straight, and I was not a person who, before that or after that, was ever prone to having headaches. Nothing like that at all. But this one was just everywhere, all at once. At first, I figured I was straining, adding additional effort where there didn't need to be any in an effortless practice, but that wasn't the case. Then I was like, oh, there's just got to be something going with my sinuses. And so, I got to the point of getting very good at the neti pot, and nothing going there, and I just had to, basically be okay with the sense that, here's, as I'm okay with these flies right now, the country. Had to be okay with the fact that, okay, I might have this headache for quite some time. And it just lasted for 10 days. And on day 11, when I woke up, it felt like somehow I'd been given a completely new head, and that was a wonderful thing. It was also coincidental with that wasn't just a physical pain thing. It was having, it felt like my entire intellect, which had been a main feature, a main strength of my life, was completely dull. In addition to that, my intuitive capacities, my simple people reading empathic capacities, gone. There's nothing there. I felt like I felt like a complete dullard. And then when the headache lifted, it was as if I was given a whole new operating system. So that was fun. Other challenges, which are pretty universal to anybody doing even meditation, like 40 minutes a day, anxiousness, restlessness, coming out of nowhere often, boredom. You have to learn to become, in a sense, very accepting of boredom, anxiousness, restlessness. Because of course, if you try to fight them, and you try to sort of whack yourself in some way, they're going to stick around. And so that was another thing. And one thing I did, find from, becoming very comfortable with boredom was kind of easy. I think I'd kind of gotten used to that over life. But like restlessness and anxiousness, now that was something that for me was quite gripping. And I had to learn how to just stay in my meditation and allow those feelings to just run through the body, and they could get, up to a fever pitch, like, go get up right now, go to the kitchen. I wasn't hungry, go to the kitchen, eat some apples and peanut butter, that sort of thing. And I'd be like, no, we're gonna, if we need the apple, we'll get an apple, but we're just gonna sit here, right now, and let the feeling pass. And what I did start to find was that every time that if I could, like, just sit through, relax through anxiousness, boredom, restlessness, that at the end of that tape, I would find myself sinking even deeper into presence, into silence. And there was just a profoundly deeper peace would come after that period every time to this day. And so it is. So yeah, that was something. Now let me look at my notes here. It's not a script, but it's notes. Let's see. Another thing is from, back into the emotional release. Like I lost my mother when I was 13 years old in a car accident. And, I did this course when I was 19 and 20. 6-7 years, not that much time had really transpired, although I felt like an eternity had. You do at that age. And, a lot of that grief had processed ahead of time, in the 2 years essentially before. But I and so many others who I've watched do a similar course, have to become comfortable with crying buckets if need be. And my goodness, the waterworks would come as needed. And God, there were more buckets of tears and waiting inside me than I possibly knew. That just has to happen. And I have seen people, really not, really not be able to handle their emotions at all. Like maybe they're not ready yet. And that has caused, hiccups and a certain amount of drama for some people. On that note, I'm very thankful that I actually went into this long course in a very gradual nature. I learned the practice. I had already been practicing, but I learned the practice. I spent some time with it. I, moved myself. This is maybe a quick thing, but I moved myself into an ashram. But I wasn't doing, 10 hours a day of meditation for, in the first 18 whatever month period. I was doing maybe 4 hours a day, sometimes 6 hours a day. When I was doing really a heavy work schedule, I was actually more, getting bathroom breaks in which I would use those as my meditation practice. So there was a lot of different time leading up to such a long thing, which gave me the chance to actually really have a lot of encounters with the stuff that was inside and trying to get out. And I was able to do that where there were lots of people around who could help me by, totally listening to what I was saying and taking me seriously as a being, but also not taking me seriously and giving plenty of space for me to say some really awful stuff and have it just be, water off a duck's back. Especially, and this, happened, came a little bit back up for me, but certainly for others I've seen in these sorts of long retreats, anger, even in men. It's like I was, essentially trained in a way, not necessarily explicitly, but I was basically encouraged to be, the one with the cool head in a hot situation as an 8-year-old or as a 7-year-old. And the only way I knew how to do that was to ferociously and furiously stuff anger down, and it would erupt every now and then. I'd get into a pretty wild fight every few years or so, but those eruptions were not at all sufficient in completely emptying up the massive reservoir that was steadily building up. And so at some point, that had to pop. And a deep meditation practice that's moving you into samadhi is if you want to avoid having your repressed emotions come up, do avoid effective meditation practice, because it'll do it. And so, my God, it was like there was some kind of like a pressurized beer keg of anger in there. And, it was, I'm glad I didn't get into any physical fights, but I certainly, I certainly, made some very colorful remarks to my monkish peers in those days, and I'm so grateful that that they were up for the task. And I know that would actually be very difficult, in sort of the normal world. And there is some wisdom in, picking people that you trust, that you kind of know can handle that sort of thing, not just being with strangers. Of course, that. So what's next here? I mean, other things that, other things that are often challenging is probably, actually love. That's an interesting thing. And, mainly because I don't think humans in our society are actually particularly well equipped to feel it. In fact, when I went out as a meditation teacher, my assumption was that the biggest repressed emotions that I would encounter in the population would be things like sadness, grief, anger, fear, jealousy, sexual feelings or stuff like that. And honestly, at this point, I'd have to say that the thing that people repress the most is actually love or joy. and the thing that, in terms of the virulence of the repression, the force of the repression, love typically. That's the thing that's clamped down the most. And so, in deep retreats, that is the thing that I think personally, yes, myself and so many people that I witnessed had to allow to move through their system. And by move through my system, sometimes it doesn't mean you say anything to anybody, because there's not necessarily words that are trying to come from it, but even just being natural, being innocent, and letting yourself be in a state of joy, love, bliss at certain decibel levels of it can make you feel very, 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 very vulnerable. Of course, some people are just perfect with it, and that's great. Everybody's got different things that challenge them. Like for instance, even beyond love, maybe the most intimate space beyond that is when you're in a group of people, many of whom can essentially see right through you, and you find yourself experiencing silence itself. You find yourself in I'm going to say a mystical state, but that actually, it's a bit of a misnomer. It is one of the most grounded states to be experiencing samadhi, and simply sharing the samadhi space with other people. That for some it's not challenging. For many, it is one of the most vulnerable spaces and places you can be. And so I guess there's a theme here. In terms of long meditation retreat challenges, and that is basically having the willingness to be transparent to yourself and to anybody else who might be around, who serves as often the audience, to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to sit in the natural state, to allow oneself to be exactly as one is. Sounds strange that such a thing could ever be challenging, could ever be difficult, but actually it is. And if you're saying no, it's not, well, you may find you might find at some point you get into a very good meditation practice, and then you do it for a while, and then you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. That's a possibility. Like, what else do I have here? I'm sorry, I'm not taking I'm taking a ramble with a notebook right now. Oh, sure, yeah, there. I would have even missed that. So I mentioned this before, and I mentioned it in passing, and I used a word that's ill-defined, the shadow. And of course, I am using it more or less in the Jungian sense, and I kind of like the way that he reframed Freud's unconscious into the shadow, and the mechanisms for repression for Jung are different than Freud in many ways. But yeah, that's where I'm going. And essentially the way I'll frame it is, as I did before, the shadow is that repository of everything that at some point we deemed unworthy of love. And of course, when I say we or I deemed, it's not being done in a vacuum either. Typically, we're very small, and we're doing it in response to parents or older siblings or other relatives or whomever, we perceive to have some power over us, who is in a position to decide to feed us or not feed us. And I think it really does go into that deep territory where worthiness of love and survival, even if it's not like a conscious understanding, are tantamount, are deeply connected. And that's why, those that early material that we stuff down, is the stuff that ends up in life tripping us up the most. And by tripping us up, of course, you probably know what I mean. This goes into questions of why meditate, why waste your time doing that, something like that. Well, it's because, we're basically much of the time being run by really bad ancient decisions that we previously made. And those ancient decisions are profoundly affecting our quality of life, the decisions we make, the opportunities we run from, even though they're the chariot that's been sent to the rescue, et cetera, et cetera. We will be run by by this shadow material in a way, and not in a malevolent or conscious way. It's just it's in prison, and of course it's true that some of the most beautiful, some of the most wonderful material is down in the shadow. Some of the great strengths, so much energy is down there. And also because, there's often energy gain with this kind of deep shadow work, simply because it's when we repress something, it seems to not be a one-time energetic transaction. It's not like you're two and you're like, well, I'm not going to draw anymore. Done. No, there's something of that I'm not going to draw anymore. Usually happens at 5, I think. There's something of that I'm not going to draw anymore that we're unconscious to, but persists the entirety of the life. We've just become used to it. We become unconscious of it. And so it is always wonderful to see when all the people I've seen on deep retreat, the childlike ease that is stitched into their face by the end of that sort of retreat. Night and day. Absolutely. And of course, I'll say again, one doesn't have to be engaging in these, intense 5 months, many hours of the day sorts of programs to get profound benefits. One can get profound benefits from working one's job, eating one's food, walking one's dog, and meditating regularly every day. And it doesn't even have to be in like huge volume. Like I think 1 to 2 hours is actually a great 2 hours, I think. But I'd like to go longer than shorter. 2 hours is a wonderful length of time for someone doing a so-called householder path. That's a very robust time period that you can divide up in 2 or 3 sessions in a day. That's great. So what else? Well, I mean, the shadow material it's really interesting, actually, how frightened one can become of, let's say, joy. That's something that at the surface can sound really bizarre. But if I've seen it once, I've seen it dozens and dozens of times, where something way down in somebody has finally relaxed after decades of stiffness. It's relaxed, and the content that's coming up is joy. And it's very interesting, like in my own experience, so go from the inside here. I remember, like an out of nowhere fear sensation coming up, kind of full body everywhere all at once, and I had enough remove that my mind wasn't getting freaked out by any of this. There was a calm, deep calm space. And I was like, oh, okay, look at this. So my mind is, I'm having thoughts of like, oh my God, this is fucked up or something like that. And they weren't, sucking me in. And so then something, deeper in the mind was like, wait a second. I don't, fear's all right, but I don't think this is actually fear. Let's go into it a little bit more. And as soon as I sort of went into it, or really I could say as soon as I let my some aspect of my attention in my body relax into it, it became completely obvious that this was love and like childlike joy. And yeah, like attendant with that, I say childlike joy because attendant with that was a sense of, I was getting like images of myself at 6, images of myself at 7, images of myself at 5, and not simply images, but while I'm having the images, there's a sense of actually of remembering exactly what it was like to be in my body, in 1988, in 1989, in 1990, like picture perfect, full-bodied memories, and I didn't remember in that healing, I'll call it, the reasoning or the what was the stimulus behind deciding to actually shut out certain, kind of, we're going to let ourselves feel this joyful but not this joyful, whatever. But it's not important. One doesn't have to remember it. It was just, okay, wow. and so, yeah, this is all, I'm talking about the challenge, but this is also the fun. If you have, I'm going to say the courage, I mean, it's not like you're getting shot at here or whatever, but it's actually, it's funny. Some people on retreats would be like, I'd rather be shot at than, than feel the inherent love and joy that I've been locking away for 40 years or something. Like that's the weirdness of this territory from the surface level of the mind. Now, if you've been in these trenches, you know that's not weird. What I'm saying, yeah. And so, yeah, that's actually one of the great additional tools if you're going deeper on the path. I mean, I'm going to call it a tool, but whatever, is do you have the willingness? It's important to know what you're willing to do. Maybe it's not important. You should go in blind. But it's good if you have the willingness, like, no, I'm going to allow myself to feel these things without trying to edit them, without trying to run away from them in whatever way I do. Sometimes it's obvious as, I'm not going to eat like a pan of brownies or something. I'm not going to masturbate. Or I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. We have all sorts of different ways that we are, trying to run. Can I like sit there and not run from it, And therein lies, again, it doesn't sound like much to some people, but it's a lot. If you can do that, like fully, So, let's see, how long have we been doing this video right now? 27 minutes. I can't believe anybody's still watching this right now. Let's see what else we have. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, those aren't important. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, another thing. And now, so I've been ranting on about like essentially the importance of being willing to feel everything. And feel everything on its own terms, not trying to control the situation, but, really surfing it like it's a wave that's trying to move through. Now, second to that, and I hope I don't say this like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, is another thing people get stuck in is there are some people who like love the shit out of the healing process and probably in a certain way love it too much. And so, and they're doing something extracurricular here. And so what they're basically, the problems that this type can get into is recycling the stories, again and again. Like, oh, and this happened, and so, I've moved it, I've cleared it. Also here the problem can come in when, like, agency is taken where in some ways there isn't agency. So I just said I cleared it, or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with using that sentence and having that experience, but here can be the challenge for some is like we're busybodies, and we're trying to. It's kind of a form of control, and we're like, oh yeah, God, that thing from when I was 3, and I think it's cleared, and now the thing from the other day, it was the thing when I was 5, and whatever, and it's like now it's great. But let's let all that go. And, of course, if I were ever told, let something go, that wouldn't have been very good actionable advice for me. And actually, I think it's not very good actionable advice for most people. Instead of being told, let it go, I had a very good mechanism. And so, my mechanism was essentially the meditation practice. And so, that's the key is to be able to have something that you can return to that takes you below the level of the stories, even if they're great, successful stories, and so you get to let the sweeping happen that needs to happen on its own. Let the body do its thing. Let the psyche use its own self-healing mechanisms to do its thing. and use your mind to continually re-engage in a process of progressive relaxation and progressively deepening into that which doesn't change. That which is under the source. And when I say all this, it's sometimes like, how to meditate? I say, Ashire's Ascension, no, or transcendental meditation, or some kind of effortless bija mantra. I mean, that's my path. That's not the only path that's out there. But when people say, what have you been doing? I don't think they watch to 20, 30 minutes in the video to get the answer. But mantra meditation, and also when I say mantra meditation, many people get the idea of like Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, machine gunning is what we call that. Absolutely not the case with how we're doing practice. And here's a little taster, in a way. Let's get comfortable right now, okay? And get in a comfortable position, and let your breathing be natural, all right? It can be arrhythmic. If you want to come along with this, maybe pause the video if you need to go to the bathroom or something like that right now, but you're back from the bathroom now, great. So let's let the breathing be natural, okay? We're going to use, in this case, we'll use a very simple Sanskrit bija mantra, and one that, is universally benevolent and benign. It doesn't have any, I think, caustic effects on any nervous system, very common one. And we're going to use the bija mantra Shreem. Okay, I'll say it again. Shreem. All right, and there's different ways of transliterating that into English, but for simplicity, you can just think of it as S-H-R-E-E-M. All right, that'll help phonetically. So we're going to use that mantra, but we're going to use it in a very special way. We're not going to Om Namah Shivaya machine gun the shit out of it. And you're not going to like chuck it into your mind with a great deal of force. You're going to use it as if you're taking a little pebble and you're dropping it into a pond, and you're letting the ripples be as they are. And when you notice that your mind has traveled into a completely different zip code of thought, it's at that point that you come back and you just simply think Shreem. Now when you think it can be long sometimes, it can be short and staccato, doesn't necessarily matter. And it'll probably change as you change, and if you adopt this as a practice, which is a great practice, by the way, I'm saving you quite a bit of money actually on this one. If you adopt it as a practice, the nature of it will not only change in one sitting, but it can feel very, very different from a month down the road or 2 months down the road, and go back and forth. So again, let's go back to sitting comfortably, breathing. Let yourself notice the thoughts moving through your mind, the body sensations, which are also thoughts, any emotions that might be there, and very easily and very gently introduce Shreem into your mind. Think it and then drop it. No trying, no straining. There's no need to force other thoughts out of the mind. There's no need to focus deeply on Shreem. You can think it very lightly. Think it and drop it. And when you notice you're way down the block in some completely different thought, it's at that point that you come back to it. That simple. So we're going to practice like this for the next several minutes. You can go longer. And in fact, it might be good to press pause on the video and extend beyond. So press pause. Great. Now you're back. So that's supposed to be very easy, very natural, a very simple way of doing bija mantra practice. And it's a style of practice that is very old. and traces itself, in terms of the effortless practice, traces itself back to the Dandi Swamis of India, who still teach it in their courtyards to this day. Strangely, that style of effortless meditation practice was reserved for what they considered the advanced japa meditators, and strangely the beginning japa practices. Honestly, like machine gunning or just going around the mala, I know some people get pissed at me. I think might be compared to that a bloody waste of time. Waste. Go into the effortless practice. Skip that. Save yourself 20 years. There's no need to make things more difficult than they need to be. And go ye first to samadhi. And concentration, absorption, non-violence, self-restraint, non-stealing, all the yamas and niyamas of yoga sprout on their own from that core. You don't work on them to get there. So I see we rambled right into practical meditation instruction, which suits me very fine. And probably only 10% of you made it there. So that's great. There's a reward. And for now, I think I'll conclude some of the challenges, even though, God, there's many more, difficulties that people have. Like I should, people's sexual desires, for God's sakes. I thank God that I wasn't in like a strictly celibate monastic milieu. We had a very different understanding of, what like brahmacharya and the yogic tradition, how that should be carried out. It's more of an inside out type of thing as opposed to an outside in primarily. And I seem to do fine with that in the training. Probably because maybe in the years before, maybe my desires were sufficiently sated, and I worked my ass off to get to the course to such a degree, and like sometimes 16-hour days, work days, that it's like there was a lot of focus. But that can be a genuine challenge. And actually, I think it's good to have outlets, for many people in different ways. But so it goes. What else? I mean, actually, honestly, it really comes down. The biggest challenges comes down to of how willing you are to face everything that wants to unwind. Sometimes the stuff inside us that we've been pushing away is like a mountain. And we don't necessarily make peace with it on the first pass or the second pass or the third or the fourth or the fifth or whatever. We sometimes have to keep coming up against the same mountain and falling, until we don't anymore. And thus one of the greatest virtues of the path in general, not even thinking on the small level of a tiny little 5-month retreat, that one of the greatest assets is stupid, dumb persistence. If you have a good practice, stupid, dumb persistence, just do it over and over. And don't persist if nothing's happening for 6 months or whatever. Or whatever, that gets into maybe not a good idea. But if you have enough concrete evidence that positive transformations are happening to a good degree from a spiritual practice, then there are still going to have to be times in which commitment, persistence, willingness to go through things rather than running away from them. When all these things will come up as sort of auxiliary skill sets in support of this kind of practice. It was lovely to ramble at you once again. I'll try to make a few more good videos in the next several days. I know it's been a little while since I put one out. I've been very busy. And I think I may have, most of the seats in an upcoming meditation course might be kind of all sold out, or as it were. But I'm going to be adding some more courses that take place in the upcoming month. And I'll put a pinned post which has my Substack and then also my 2 websites, as I have 2 very different types of spiritual work that I do. One is, of course, the meditation practice and teaching, and the other is I work as an intuitive astrologer. So have a lovely day, and it was wonderful to see you. Bye.